we always have, pretty much. The Japanese situation is different because we do intend to stay so long with that position, and the funding situation is so cheap that we essentially have attempted to some degree to match purchases against yen-denominated of funding. But that's not a policy of ours. In fact, that's the first time we've done that, and we've owned lots of securities in foreign currency. So we do nothing in terms of the question about its impact on quarterly and annual earnings. We don't do anything based on its impact on quarterly and annual earnings. I mean, there's never been a board meeting I can remember or the conversation I had with Charlie where I say, if we do this, our annual earnings will be this, and therefore we ought to, whether it's accounting or whether anything, we just, the number will turn out to be what it'll be. What counts is where we are 5 or 10 or 20 years from now. And if you start focusing on what number you're going to produce, you will quickly get tempted, at least based on the experience I've seen from viewing 20 companies. You'll, one way or another, play around with the numbers, and sometimes seriously play around with the numbers. And I've seen people that I trust them in all kinds of other ways, but they regard playing around with numbers as perfectly okay. And that's just not something, we just don't think about that. So actually the yen relationship of the yen, behavior of the yen in the last quarter, resulted in certain gap charges, and but it doesn't make any difference. It'll change next month or next year, and obviously we wouldn't want to be owning anything that we thought was in a currency that was really going to hell. And that's the big thing we worry about with the United States currency. I mean, the tendency of a government to want to debase its currency over time there's no system that beats that. You can pick dictators, you can pick representatives, you can do anything, but the people, there will be a push toward weaker currencies. And of course, that is, I mentioned very briefly in the annual report that the fiscal policy is what scares me in the United States, because it's made the way it is, and all the motivations are to doing a lot of things that can cause trouble with money. But that's not limited to the United States. It's all over the world, and some places it gets out of control regularly. As they know, they devalue at rates that are breathtaking, and that's continued. I mean, people can study economics and you can have all kinds of arrangements, but in the end, if you've got people that control the currency, you can issue paper money, and you will, or you can engage in clipping currencies like they used to do centuries ago. Or there will always be people, and it's the nature of their job. I'm not singling them out as particularly evil or anything like that, but the natural course of government is to make the currency worth less over time, and that's got important consequences. And it's very hard to build checks and balances into the system to keep that from happening. And we've had a lot of fun here in the last either the first 100 days or the last 100 days, whatever you want to call it, watching what happens when people try to make sure that they aren't running fiscal risks. And that game isn't over, and it never will be over, in finality. If you look up in search the great inflations of post-World War II, it's just a list that goes on forever, and the same names keep popping up and everything. So the value of currency is a scary thing. And we don't have any great system for beating that. We do in this particular Japanese position because we expect to hold it for 50 or 100 years or more. And we will be owning something that's denominated in yen and easily predictable. And we'll just, as long as the carry on it is right and everything, we'll attempt to issue Japanese denominated liabilities, but that's not because of anything we care about in terms of quarterly or annual earnings. Greg, do you have anything to say on that? Well, why don't you give me a hard one? I think that bureaucracy is something that is amazingly prevalent and contagious even in our capitalist system, and that big corporations, overwhelmingly, most of them look like they could be run better. I'm sure Berkshire does in many respects. And and government is the ultimate. So it really doesn't have any checks on it. And that's why it scares you to some extent about what the future of the currency will be, because they can print currency, and if you have people that get elected by promising people things, and that doesn't mean that they aren't sincere about all kinds of items, but there's no politician that says to anybody that, at least if they have money, that, I really think you have bad breath, and if you don't mind, would you step over and away from me? It just doesn't happen. And so I think the problem of how you control revenue and expenses in government is the one that is never fully solved, and has really hurt dramatically many civilizations, and I don't think we're immune from it, and we've come close to it. But if you tell me how in a democracy you go in and really change things, we're operating at a fiscal deficit now that is unsustainable over a very long period of time. We don't know whether that means 2 years or 20 years. Because there's never been a country like the United States. But you know that if something can't go on forever, it will end, to quote Herbert Stein, a famous economist. And we are doing something that is unsustainable. And it has the aspect to it that it gets uncontrollable to a certain point. I mean, essentially you just give up on it. And Paul Volcker, kept that from happening in the United States. But we came close. We've come close multiple times. And, we've still had very substantial inflation in the United States, but it's never been runaway yet. And that's not something you want to try and experiment with, because it feeds on itself. So I wouldn't want the job of trying to correct what's going on in revenue and expenditures of the United States with roughly a 7% gap, when probably a 3% gap is sustainable. And then the further away you get from that, the more you get to where the uncontrollable begins. And I think that it's a job I don't want, but it's a job I think should be done. And Congress does not seem good at doing it.